History has a nickname for her, the Serpent Queen. She's remembered for being a ruthless schemer who brought poison and dark magic from Italy straight to the heart of France. They call her the Black Queen, a master manipulator who planned one of the most brutal massacres in all of European history. But there's one rumor that's followed her for over 400 years. A rumor so insane it's hard to believe. That to get ultimate power, Catherine de Medici had her own son executed. So, is this the final proof of her insane ambition? Or is it just the biggest smear campaign in royal history? We are going to unravel the life of Catherine de Medici, separate the facts from the fiction, and find out what really happened in the wild court of 16th century France. Before she was the Serpent Queen, she was Caterina Maria Romula di Lorenzo de Medici, born in Florence in 1519. She came from a crazy powerful family, the Medici bankers, and she was even related to the Pope. But her early life was a complete tragedy. Her parents died within a month of her birth, and Catherine became a human chess piece in the game of European politics. At only 14 years old, she was married off to Henry, the second son of the King of France, in a massive political deal. When she got to the French court, they basically hated her. She was an Italian, an outsider whose family were seen as just merchants by the old-school French nobles. To make it even worse, her new husband, Henry, was obsessed with his mistress, Diane de Poitiers, leaving Catherine completely alone and humiliated. For the first 10 years of her marriage, her job was on the line because she couldn't have a baby. People were constantly whispering that the king would divorce her. She was a queen, but she had zero power. But Catherine was a survivor. After a decade of stress, she finally gave birth to her first child, a son named Francis. And she didn't stop there. 9 more children followed, locking in her place in the Valois dynasty. She had done her job. For years, she stayed in the background, a quiet queen. But in 1559, a freak jousting accident changed everything. A splinter from a lance flew into King Henry II's eye, and after 10 days of agony, he died. In that moment, Catherine de Medici, the forgotten Italian queen, was suddenly thrown into the center of power. Her 15-year-old son, Francis II, was the new king of France, and Catherine was no longer just a mother. She was the queen mother. But how did this lonely Italian woman become the most powerful person in France? With her weak teenage son, Francis II, on the throne, Catherine's power started to grow, but she was still walking through a political minefield. The court was split between huge rival families, especially the super-Catholic House of Guise. But a much bigger threat was hanging over the entire country: religion. France was being ripped apart by the Protestant Reformation. French Protestants, called Huguenots, were gaining followers and power, which was a direct challenge to the Catholic king. This wasn't just a religious argument, it was a political explosion waiting to happen. Catherine's world was thrown into even more chaos when, after just 1 year, her son Francis II died. A bad ear infection had turned into a brain abscess. Now her second son, Charles, was King Charles IX, and he was only 10 years old. This was Catherine's moment. In an incredible 1000 IQ move, she outplayed all her rivals and had herself named regent, basically the ruler of France, to run the country for her young son. For the first time, Catherine had real, actual power. At first, she tried to be a peacemaker. She searched for a way for Catholics and Huguenots to live together. This wasn't because she secretly liked the Protestants. It was a smart move to keep France from collapsing and to protect her son's throne. She even passed laws giving them limited freedom. But the hatred from both sides was too intense. The French wars of religion exploded in 1562, throwing the kingdom into a nightmare cycle of violence and broken peace treaties. It was in this fire that the legend of the ruthless Catherine de Medici would be created, and one event, more than anything else, would give her a dark reputation forever. By 1572, Catherine was still trying desperately to make peace. As a huge gesture of unity, she arranged a marriage between her Catholic daughter, Margaret, and the most important Protestant prince, Henry of Navarre. The wedding brought all the Protestant leaders to the super-Catholic city of Paris. It was supposed to be a symbol of peace. Instead, it became a total bloodbath. The tension in Paris was insane. The Huguenot leader, Admiral Gaspard de Coligny, was becoming a massive influence on the young King Charles IX. He was pushing for a war against Catholic Spain, a war Catherine knew would be a complete disaster for France. Afraid she was losing control over her own son, it looks like Catherine was part of a plot to have Coligny assassinated. But the attempt failed. The admiral was only wounded. Panic took over. The Huguenots were furious and wanted justice, and the Catholics in Paris were getting ready to riot. Afraid of a Protestant attack and being exposed for the assassination attempt, Catherine met with her council. It was here, historians believe, that the horrifying decision was made. To stop a Huguenot uprising, they would launch a surprise attack and kill all the Huguenot leaders, who were all in Paris for the wedding. On the night of August 24th, 1572, the killing started. Admiral Coligny was brutally murdered, and his death kicked off a wave of unbelievable violence across the city. What might have started as a targeted hit spiraled into an uncontrollable massacre. Catholic mobs, filled with religious rage, started killing any Huguenot they could find. The violence spread from Paris to the rest of France and lasted for weeks. It's estimated that anywhere from 5,000 to 30,000 people were killed. The St. Bartholomew's Day massacre forever destroyed Catherine's reputation. Historians still argue about how much she was to blame. Did she want a full-on slaughter, or did she just lose control of the situation? But she was, without a doubt, involved in the decision that lit the fuse. To her enemies, and for centuries after, she wasn't a peacemaker. She was a murderous tyrant, the Italian queen who had drowned France in Protestant blood. This one event became the foundation of her black legend and made even the craziest rumors about her seem believable. When you already have a reputation for planning a nationwide massacre, it's not a big jump for people to think you could do anything. And the darkest rumor of all, the one that makes her seem like the ultimate monster, is that she executed her own son to hold on to power. This is the biggest myth of Catherine's life. But is any of it true? Let's break it down, son by son. First, Francis II. We already know he died in 1560 when he was just 16. History is super clear on this one. He died from a terrible ear infection that led to a brain abscess. There is literally zero credible evidence that his mother had anything to do with it. His death was a tragedy that pushed Catherine into power, not a murder she planned. Next is Charles IX, the king during the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre. Charles died in 1574, only 2 years after the massacre. He was only 23. He wasn't killed by an executioner. He died from a long and painful sickness. Historians all agree he died of tuberculosis. Far from killing him, Catherine was actually made ruler of France again, while they waited for her third son to come back from Poland and take the throne. Finally, there was Henry III, Catherine's favorite son and the last one to be king. He actually lived longer than his mother, but only by a few months. Catherine died in January 1589, probably from a lung infection. Henry III's reign ended that same year when he was assassinated by a Catholic fanatic. Catherine was already dead. So did Catherine de Medici execute her own son? The historical record is 100% clear. No, there's no evidence, no original documents, no believable story that she was responsible for her son's deaths. The claim is a complete myth. a lie that came from the dark legend that already surrounded her. By most accounts, she was an extremely devoted mother who fought like crazy to protect her sons and their power. So if the most insane accusation against her is completely false, where did this black legend really come from? How did a practical, if sometimes brutal, political player become history's Serpent Queen? If you're enjoying this deep dive into the craziest parts of royal history, make sure you smash that subscribe button and hit the notification bell. And let us know in the comments, what other historical villains do you think we should investigate? The legend of Catherine de Medici as the evil poisoning queen is one of history's most successful and longest-lasting character assassinations. The truth, of course, is way more complicated. No, Catherine did not execute her own son. That is 100% false. But her reputation for being ruthless isn't totally wrong. She was a key player in the decision that led to the Saint, Bartholomew's Day Massacre, an event that is, and should be, a massive stain on her name. But her dark legend was also created by other things. She was a woman with immense power in a world run by men, and that was enough to make people angry. She was an Italian in a French court, making her an easy target for racist propaganda that painted her as a sneaky foreigner corrupting the country. Her interest in things like astrology was twisted by her enemies into accusations of black magic. And of course, Protestant writers, her biggest political enemies, pumped out propaganda showing her as an evil, manipulative monster. Catherine de Medici wasn't a saint. She was a 16th century ruler who made brutal choices in a brutal era to protect the French monarchy and her children. She was a political survivor, a realist who used both peace deals and extreme violence to get through decades of civil war. The image of the Serpent Queen is a cartoon, a legend built on her own harsh actions, but blown up by sexism, racism, and 400 years of really effective propaganda. She was, as one person wrote back then, both devil and an angel, a ruler way more complex and interesting than the one-dimensional villain history remembers.